Part 20. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 191. Chapter 191. Does he want to correct my mistake? It's not kindness. Even though Baiken did wrong in the past, I don't think Baiken will let similar things happen again in the future. Sunian was just talking casually. But he didn't expect that after saying this, he heard Lee Baiken's affirmative voice, "Yes, I won't let such a thing happen." This voice made Sunian's body startled. Sunian then looked at Lee Baiken. She saw the determined expression on Lee Baiken's face. I don't know why, but Sunian couldn't even think of any doubts when looking at Lee Baiken's firm expression. But Lee Ji-eunhong said, "Can you just say it? Baiken, I don't care what you think, but my bottom line is that Nian will not be harmed at all, so after what happened now, you still want me to Nian to you, I tell you, dream." Lee Baiken didn't say anything and just picked up Sunian. "What are you doing, Lee Baiken? What do you want to do, you brat? I tell you, if you mess around, don't blame me for being rude." Lee Ji-eunhong's face was full of anger. Lee Baiken picked up the suit next to him and wrapped him up. "Dad, can you let Sunian stay with you at any time?" These words left Lee Ji-eunhong speechless. "The safest place now is actually around you and me. Apart from you and me, Huo Linyuan will take action anywhere." Lee Ji-eunhong was completely speechless. After all, why did he love Sunian? He is also a father-in-law. If Sunian is kept by his side all the time, then if word spreads, it will not be very good for Sunian's reputation. "Dad, I know what you are worried about, but I swear here that I will not hurt Sunian in the future, and I will not let others hurt her. From now on, I will use my life to protect her. I have been away from my old home for a long time." Sunian still couldn't help but look at the man beside him. His words were still on her mind. She admitted that at that time, she was a little surprised when she saw Lee Baiken's attitude, but now she is still mostly curious and confused. Is this guy's sense of responsibility aroused? No, even if this dog-licking sense of responsibility is aroused, it should not be aroused in me. He probably brought me around just to threaten Huo Linyuan and Lan Min, and even take 10,000 steps back, so that if Lan Min's body has problems, he can pull me out as soon as possible. Do you also think that I am doing this so that after Lan Ren's accident, I can pull you for surgery as soon as possible?" After hearing Lee Baiken directly say what was on his mind, her eyes widened immediately, and then she immediately waved her hands. "Baiken, how could I think so? Since I am willing to be with you, then I definitely believe you." Lee Baiken, who had been listening to her random thoughts, stretched out his long arms and brought the person into his arms. "I know you don't believe me now, but I will prove to you that I am different from before. In the past, I was indeed guilty. I made some mistakes and I will correct them one by one in the future." These words made Sunian confused. Lee Baiken smiled when he saw Sunian's confused expression. He knew that Sunian would not believe what he said now. It didn't matter, they had a lot of time anyway. He can correct it slowly. Let Sunian see his sincerity. What does Lee Baiken mean by this? Does he want to correct my mistake? Lee Baiken. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 192. Chapter 192. It's a pity that Lee Baiken is destined to die early. Arrived at the place, Lee Baiken directly took Sunian out of the car. Throughout the entire process that followed, he did not let Sunian's feet touch the ground. After sending Sunian back to the room, Lee Baiken began to arrange security and strengthen various manpower. "It seems that we want to make this place a place where even flies can't fly in." Even so, Lee Baiken was still a little dissatisfied, so he called Jo Soo over, "Go and order a few cars with high safety levels to facilitate travel." Josu left immediately after hearing this. Then he gave some instructions. After giving the instructions, Lee Baikan sat on the sofa and began to think about what he should do next. Since Sunian has been identified, she must change her view of herself and really regard herself as her husband. When thinking about this question, Lee Baikan couldn't help but chuckle. Because he thought of Sunian's attitude towards him. It seems that change is really difficult. When he thought of this, Lee Baikan couldn't help but press his eyebrows. Sunian in the bedroom was also thinking about this issue. She hugged the quilt. Feeling that I have no future. I actually felt that the way Lee Baikan said those words, was a little moved. Sunian couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Huddled the quilt and muttered to himself, it's a pity that this guy Lee Baikan is destined to die early, but this guy's appearance is really good. Change Lee Baikan's life trajectory. When Sunian thought of this, he clutched the quilt tightly. Do you really want to give up your calligraphy treasure and the only person connected to you by blood for Lee Baikan? Just for that little lust? Not worth it? When thinking of this, Sunian couldn't help but chuckled. Even if he saved Lee Baikan and changed his life, he wouldn't be me. After all, his personality is like a licking dog. Hey, Sunian, what are you thinking about? What is so confusing about this matter? Sunian really found it a bit funny. She felt that if she took the risk to change Lee Baikan's life trajectory, even if she got Lee Baikan's seed and became pregnant, then according to his temperament, he would never let her go. Even then, the old man will protect her. But according to Lee Baikan's temperament, maybe they would really tie her to the operating table, and then use force to beat the child in her belly. When Sunian thought of this, he felt a little shaken and then slowly disappeared. She closed her eyes. Wrap yourself up into a ball. But at this moment, there was the sound of the door opening. Before Sunian could react, he felt the position behind him suddenly sink. Are you scared? These three simple words made Sunian's body stiffen slightly. Then she clearly felt that the man carefully held her in his arms. But she didn't say anything. But with eyes closed. In the darkness, only the sound of breathing circulates. Just when Lee Baikan thought Sunian had fallen asleep, Sunian's voice sounded again. Why doesn't this guy leave? My feet are cramping. I am already like this, what else does this guy want to do? Lee Baikan. What else could Lee Baikan do, except let go of Sunian? Sunian pricked up his ears to listen to the sound. After confirming that there was no voice from Lee Baikan, he breathed a sigh of relief. After all, she has wanted to go to the toilet for a long time. It's really not easy to be a vicious female supporting role. You can't go to the toilet whenever you want. But when Sunian sat up, he saw Lee Baikan sitting next to him. The two people looked at each other. Before Lee Baikan could say anything, Sunian stood up and hurried towards the bathroom. Oops, I forgot that the cake I bought last time should have expired, my stomach is. Sunian, I want someone. Lee Baikan, I want my heart. You may feel that the emotion is a bit abrupt, but that's okay. I will explain it later. I will make it up. No, I will write it carefully and it will definitely be perfect. Thank you all for your subscriptions. Subscribing here is a sign of love for me. Thank you all. I will continue to work hard to update. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 193. Chapter 193 Old Man, Nian, you don't have to hang yourself from a tree. I think we need to fundamentally solve this problem. Li Jianhong looked at Sunian seriously. Sunian also sat upright obediently. When Li Jianhong saw her, He held her hand. Nian Nian, what happened this time has reminded me that I shouldn't be so selfish anymore. You are a good girl. You can't be harmed like this by my son, so I feel like our fate has almost ended here. Sun Nian was stunned by these words. It also made Li Baikan sit up straight. Li Baikan, Dad, what do you mean? But Li Jianhong ignored Li Baikan's words. Nian Nian, there are many people in this world, and they don't necessarily have to hang themselves on a tree. With your appearance, you can definitely find a man who is much better than Baikan. There is no need for you to get involved in their affairs. Really, I am really scared. I am afraid that you will be in danger again. If you have problems because of this guy, then I really can't explain it to your father. Li Jianhong was awakened by Li Baikan's words. Indeed, according to Huo Linyuan's method, Sun Nian must stay with him and Li Baikan to be safe. But in Li Jianhong's case, the only way to be safe is to stay by his side. Although Li Jianhong didn't want to admit it, he knew that if there was really something wrong with that Lan Ren, then this brat would definitely hand Sun Nian over as soon as possible. Dad, I appreciate your kindness, but this is my life. Li Jianhong continued to persuade, don't say it's your life. Your life shouldn't be like this. Nian Nian, you are the best girl I have ever seen. You deserve happiness. Let's do this. I'll send you away. Send you away, go outside and see the people and things outside. If you want to continue to like Baikan, then that's it. If you fall in love with another man, then I can marry you off as my daughter. Although Sun Nian was extremely moved by the old man's words, but she always felt a little awkward. The father-in-law persuaded his daughter-in-law to remarry in front of his son. Wow, this scene is really beautiful. Much more exciting than in the last life. After all, at this time in the last life, Li Baikan couldn't breathe. Is it the distortion of human nature or the loss of morality? Although Li Baikan also found it a bit funny, he now knew what he should say. Dad, I was wrong about what happened before. I will definitely treat Sun Nian well and won't let her suffer any harm again. But when Li Baikan said this, Li Jianhong immediately looked over. You told me this, do you think I might believe it? Baikan, I know that I am using strong methods to force you to marry Nian Nian. Everyone will when I make a mistake. I now admit that I was wrong, and I want to correct this mistake, can't I? If that's the case, then Dad, why don't you give me time to correct my mistakes? Li Baikan was not afraid of the old man's momentum at all. If it were any other time, then Li Jianhong would definitely be very happy that his son had finally enlightened and understood what Sun Nian was doing, but now he was really scared. Li Jianhong, correction, I promise you now, if something similar happens again, what will you do? Will it cost Sun Nian's life? Li Baikan, even if you are my son, I can't take her life, go gamble. Sun Nian looked at Li Jianhong, his eyes moistened. Not to mention it is for Mo Bao, even if it is for the sake of the old man, I will stay here. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Zhang Word. Chapter 194. Chapter 194. Habit is really a terrible thing. At this moment, Li Baikan really felt a sense of powerlessness. He knew very clearly why the old man was like this. Those things he did to Sun Nian before. Even though he was bound by the so-called plot, it was still caused by Li Baikan himself. Even if Sun Nian wanted to stay away from him, it would be a good idea. But he didn't want to do this. Why? His life must be bound by the so-called plot. He must fall in love with the designated person according to the plot and determine when to die. He did not want to accept his fate. Li Baikan knelt down under the old man's gaze and said, Dad, I was wrong before. I was really wrong. I won't let those things happen again. While saying this, Li Baikan felt his heart began to hurt violently again. He felt that this was the so-called plot controlling him. But he didn't want the plot to control it. Lee Baiken's fate can only be controlled by himself. What you say now, do you think it is somewhat credible? Lee Ji-eunhong was angry now. You have always liked to go against me since you were a child, forget about other things, but why do you still give me advice on this matter? Playing devil's advocate, why, Lee Baiken, do you want to make me angry to death before you are satisfied? Lee Baiken listened to the old man's words, and the veins on his hands popped out. He knocked his head to the ground. Dad, I didn't. I'm not here to contradict you. Sunian next to him didn't know what to say when he saw this scene. She looked at Lee Baiken, hoping to see some showmanship on Lee Baiken's face and find some flaw. But why is Lee Baiken like this? Why did Lee Baiken behave like this? What exactly does he want to do? What on earth is going on in this plot? Lee Baiken felt a huge pain in his heart now, but when he heard this, he suddenly felt that he could no longer feel the pain in his body. He raised his head. The eyes of the two people met again. Sunian subconsciously took a few steps back when he saw Lee Baiken's eyes. She didn't know why she backed away, and she suddenly wanted to run away. It's better not to stay here. Let's go. But how could Lee Baiken let Sunian go? He stood up immediately, walked to Sunian's side, and grabbed her hand directly. What happened in the past was my fault, but I can guarantee that I will not do it in the future. So, what a plot. He won't let the plot hold him back. Sunian swallowed, and then tried to break away from Lee Baiken's hand. Or are you thinking about it? I have thought about it very clearly, and I know very well that this is the last chance. If I don't cherish this opportunity, then there is no possibility for me. Lee Baiken was very strong and Sunian couldn't break free at all. Sunian's heart was really confused. But at this moment, Lee Baiken suddenly said, Sunian, you succeeded. This made Sunian's body stiffen immediately. You have successfully made me get used to you. If you are not by my side these days, I will always look at your position subconsciously, and always think about what you will do and what you are thinking when you are not by my side. Are you very happy? Lee Baiken looked at Sunian and said word by word, habit is really a terrible thing. Lee Baiken laughed when he said this. Perhaps all this is the so-called destiny. After all, there are many people in this world, but he is the only one who can hear the voice in her heart. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 195. Chapter 195. Lee Baiken, do you know what you are talking about? Sunian asked. Lee Baiken, do you know what you are talking about? I know. Sunian really didn't know what to say at this moment. At this time, Lee Baiken shortened the distance between them. And he said to her word by word, Sunian, can you trust me just once? Sunian knew that according to his personality, he should be cheering and acting very happy now. But I didn't know how to look into Lee Baiken's eyes. She really can't act at all at this moment. Time is passing by little by little. Sunian said out of nowhere, I do. After Sunian said this, Lee Baiken lifted her up from the spot and said, Dad, I believe you will respect Sunian's choice. Don't worry, I won't let you down this time. After saying this, Lee Baiken hugged Sunian and left. Only then did Lee Ji-eunhong react, no, I haven't said yes yet. Why are you leaving? Don't you take me as an old man seriously? Lee Baiken, believe it or not, I will find someone better than you for Nian right away, a man who is 10,000 times worse. You are so disgusting that you don't take me seriously. But Lee Baiken had no intention of stopping at all. Only left one sentence, Sunian's health is not good and she needs a good rest now. I will take her to rest first. Back in the room, Sunian didn't react until Lee Baiken tucked him into bed. Has she captured Lee Baiken? This is all okay? Sunian then looked at Lee Baiken, his eyes wishing to turn into X-rays, and looked at Lee Baiken carefully. No, what's going on? Could he really fall in love with me? It's impossible, it shouldn't be according to the plot. Last life, well, the only time I had contact with him in my previous life was that night, for 3 minutes. Lee Baiken originally wanted to say something, but he heard it for 3 minutes. Even if he has no memory of his previous life, he is sure that he has more than 3 minutes. Author, time is not a problem, the main thing is quality, ha ha ha. In order to prevent this woman from continuing to complain, he planned to cough lightly. But at this time, Sunian finally spoke, "Do you like me?" Lee Baiken took in Sunian's doubts and said, "Why do you like me, what do you like about me, how did I make you like me, when did you like me?" This series of questions shows how unbelievable the person who asked this question is. Lee Baiken looked at Sunian. There is nothing false in the woman's eyes. Actually, he didn't know when he fell in love with her. Maybe it was because his body was controlled by the plot, but he still tried hard to put his eyes on her. Perhaps it's because she can enjoy herself in this plot. Possible. It's destined. Sunian is looking forward to it very much. Damn, I'm looking forward to it. He was obviously just acting and wanted to take my kidney. He used his beauty to fool me, but I thought he actually liked me. I was really stupid. Lee Baiken took the disappointed Sunian into his arms. I know you don't believe it, and I don't believe it either, but after seeing the explosion around you yesterday, I only had one thought in my mind. If you disappear in this, what would the world be like without your chirping? It seems like the world is missing some color. When Lee Baiken said this, he hugged Sunian harder. Although he understood that Sunian might not believe it, it was still good to tell him. When Sunian heard this, the image of Lee Baiken running to her with an anxious face appeared in his mind yesterday. She also remembered her feelings at that moment. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 196. Chapter 196. Since it's all about acting, let me take advantage of it. It's not too much. But when Sunian went to sleep, he came back to his senses. Just discovered an important thing. She seemed to be intimidated by Lee Baiken's appearance. Why did I hesitate at that time? It didn't matter whether he really liked me or pretended to like me, he was always good to me. In this case, it would be much easier for me to get the seeds. Hey, since he likes me, it's normal for him to want a seed. And if I ask this guy to tell me why he likes me, he can't tell me. The only explanation is that he is attracted by sex. Sure enough, men are all lower body animals. Let me just say, I have long legs and big breasts. How could he not feel anything? Just when Sunian was getting excited, Lee Baiken wrapped her up in a quilt. Stop thinking. You were so frightened yesterday. What you need to do now is to have a good rest. In this case, then you can feel better soon. Sunian came back to his senses. She looked at Lee Baiken and immediately showed an expression of realization. Look, this guy is really pretending. I didn't expect this guy's acting skills to be so good. I almost didn't notice it, but this guy's level is simply not as good as mine. He broke through the defense in such a short time, Lee Baiken. At this moment, Sunian suddenly stood up and kissed him lightly on the lips. Good night. Since we are all acting, then I can take advantage of it, but that's not too much. Taking advantage, if that's the case, then take advantage of it. Lee Baiken immediately pulled the smug woman back and kissed her immediately. Compared with Sunian's shallow kiss, Lee Baikon's kiss was like a violent storm, which Sunian had no ability to resist. Soon I lost my mind in this violent storm. After waiting for the end, Lee Baikon whispered in her ear, "Actually, I've wanted to tell you for a long time. Your previous kisses were all wrong, and this is called a kiss at this point." The man laughed deeply. "You made a lot of mistakes, but I like you so much, and I find it incredible in a daze." Sunian hugged Baikon again and said, "Okay, you can sleep now." Sunian nodded vaguely. Sleep under such conditions. Lee Baikon saw Sunian like this. He knew that it would be a bit difficult to make Sunian really fall in love with him. But even if it's difficult, it doesn't matter. He believes that nothing is difficult in the world but only for those who are willing. Lee Baikon also closed his eyes. Entered a dream. Who do you think you are and what qualifications do you have to sit in this position? Sunian, you just climbed into Lee Baikon's bed by mistake. What qualifications do you have to inherit everything as his wife? Sunian, I advise you, you'd better abort the child in your belly, otherwise, don't blame us elders for being ruthless. Lee Baikon listened to these voices. The picture in front of me gradually became clearer. He looked at Sunian, who was pale and had a big belly, and there were some people around her. He knows all these people, they are all directors in the company. Then he saw Sunian slap the table. "No matter what you say, I am Lee Baikon's only wife, his legal wife, and his first heir. No one can change this." End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 197. Chapter 197. Sunian, can you guarantee that the child in your belly is Lee Baikon's? Lee Baikon wanted to get close to Sunian. But when he walked to Sunian's side, he suddenly lost everything. "Sunian, don't you think it's funny when you say this? Baikon doesn't love you at all, and he doesn't regard you as his wife at all. You now regard yourself as his heir. Aren't you afraid that Baikon will fall from his grave? Climb out." At this time, a director said contemptuously. Sunian shouted directly at the man, "Then let Lee Baikon crawl out of the ground for me. In this case, I, Sunian, will definitely return all rights to Lee Baikon." Sunian. Another director spoke up, "Sunian, can you guarantee that the child in your belly is Lee Baikon's?" As soon as these words came out, everyone laughed. Lee Baikon looked at this scene, his heart was twisting, and he shouted with all his strength that she was his wife, and she was the only wife Lee Baikon recognized. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make them hear. He looked at those people and said, "Unless I do amniocentesis." "Yes, you only need to do amniocentesis, then we can trust you." And Sunian didn't panic at all. "What are you doing?" "Now all the assets of the old man and Baikon are in my possession. Now I am the major shareholder of the Lee family. No matter what you say, this can't be changed." Fact. These words made Lee Baikon couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. That's right, as long as Sunian holds all the shares, there is no need to be afraid at all. You mean to admit that the child in your belly is a bastard? Ha ha ha. Baikon and the old man were so smart that they fell into the hands of a little girl like you. In the end, I got everything. I will go to Baikon tomorrow. Please tell Baikon carefully in front of Chen's grave. I would like to know how Baikon feels. This made Lee Baikon's heart become anxious again. As expected, I heard Sunian's firm voice, "It seems that I have to do amniocentesis even if I don't have to do it. After all, the word bastard is too heavy and my child can't carry it." The screen then changed. He saw Sunian lying on the operating table. He looked at her hands held tightly, and he could feel her whole body trembling. "Can't do it, can't do it, no." Lee Baikon woke up from his dream. He covered his head. He had a nightmare again. How many times was this nightmare? At this moment, a terrible thought came into Lee Baiken's mind. Is this really a dream? Has Sunian really experienced this? When he realized this, Lee Baiken couldn't help but sweat broke out on his back. It's impossible for Sunian to have experienced this. If Sunian had experienced this, how could she have been clamoring to give birth to Mo Bao every day? Sunian is not a fool. You would still give birth to a child knowing that you would face such a situation? Moreover, the old man dotes on Sunian so much, and now he is clamoring for Sunian to divorce him and find a good man for Sunian. How could he let Sunian face such a thing? With these thoughts, Lee Baiken's panicked heart gradually calmed down. But Lee Baiken still felt that the dream was too real. It was simply the same as what he had experienced personally. But if you think about it carefully, Sunian said that he had died long ago in his previous life. Since he was dead, how could he experience it with his own life? Even though he thought so, Lee Baiken still lay down and couldn't help but hold Sunian, who was sleeping beside him, in his arms. Come to find peace of mind. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 198. Chapter 198. I had a nightmare last night. After Sunian woke up in the morning, she felt that Lee Baiken looked at her a little strangely. But I can't tell you exactly what is weird about it. It's just a weird feeling anyway. She couldn't help but look at Lee Baiken many times, but she couldn't see why. I had a nightmare last night. At this time Lee Baiken spoke. Sunian looked at him. Lee Baiken pinched his brow bone and then smiled. Sunian thought for a while and couldn't help but said, Baiken, you've been having nightmares a lot lately. This made Lee Baiken startled. It is indeed a bit frequent. Thinking about it carefully, the nightmares I have had these days seem to be connected together. Can be connected in series. Is he overthinking it, or maybe it's because too many things have happened recently? Lee Baiken breathed a long sigh of relief, but when you are by my side, I can feel at ease. Immediately he pulled Sunian into his arms. When the aura that belonged to Sunian enveloped him, Lee Baiken's mood felt slightly better. These words really made Sunian's old face turn red. Shit, this guy just talks about love no matter how he talks about love. Why do I feel like this guy is in a higher rank than me? Why didn't I realize that this guy is so good at talking before? It makes even a shameless person like me blush a little and my heart beats. Hearing Sunian's voice, Lee Baiken felt much better. Your heartbeat is a little fast, are you uncomfortable? Lee Baiken asked knowingly. Sunian's body was a little stiff, and he said with a sneer, No, my heartbeat is not fast at all. Baiken, you feel wrong. After Sunian finished speaking, a generous hand was placed on her heart. Really, then why is your heart beating so fast? It's really abominable that you actually laughed at me. Sunian put on a smile and said in a sweet voice, It's disgusting, Baiken, people also want to save face, how can you say it so directly? You are really bad. As he said that, he used his hands pound his chest. You are a licking dog, let's see if I don't beat you to death. Ha ha ha, when I was acting coquettishly, I hit him until it hurt to death. According to Lee Baiken's status, he definitely wouldn't show it. He could only suffer the consequences. Lee Baiken took in the woman's cunning eyes. When Sunian's deliberately hard fist landed on Lee Baiken's chest, she hissed in pain. What kind of plane are you doing? This guy is so hard, it hurts my hand. Lee Baiken couldn't help but smile, and then held Sunian's hand, it hurt so much from the beating. Sunian looked up at Lee Baiken, and naturally saw the smile on Lee Baiken's face, which made Sunian feel a little unhappy. Why does it hurt? It's my hand that hurts so much. This guy has to pretend to be a bit decent, so fake, his acting skills are far worse than mine. Humph, this ungrateful guy used such acting skills to deceive me. Does he really think that I am an idiot? But it's okay, I can just take advantage of this opportunity and get his seed. Lee Baiken. Lee Baiken suddenly realized an important issue now. It doesn't matter if Sunian doesn't like him, her purpose is to get his seed. He even thinks that if this little woman gets the seed, she might immediately put on a skirt and deny anyone. This point really gave him a headache. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Which John Word. Chapter 199. Chapter 199. Why is there something wrong with this guy's cheerfulness? Lee Baiken, I did what you asked and took so many risks. Do you want to give me some reward? Lu Jing walked up to Lee Baiken angrily. Lee Baiken, what do you want? Sunian. When Lu Jing said this, his face hurt. What happened yesterday really made Lu Jing angry. This Lee Baiken, they were in the same group after all, and he kindly came to help him, but the guy turned around and ran away, causing him to be beaten like this by Huo Linyuan again. When Lee Baiken heard this, a coldness appeared in his eyes. Just when Lee Baiken wanted to say something, Sunian's voice sounded in his mind. Humph, I knew this guy wanted to take advantage of me and deliberately acted like he liked me. But this dog-licking male lead is really amazing. He would sell his looks for the heroine. Bah, I was almost confused by this guy's looks. Sunian, you can't be such a loser. You can't achieve anything big if you are lustful. The corners of Lee Baiken's mouth raised slightly. But Lu Jing suddenly felt bad when he saw the smile on Lee Baiken's face. Lee Baiken, let's be reasonable. Yesterday I ran to save you, but you ended up killing me just for that woman. Lost it. Do you know how many beatings I received? If my handsome face is really damaged by Huo Linyuan, then I will be so sad. While saying this, Lu Jing touched his face. 1 month. This inexplicable sentence left Lu Jing confused. Lee Baiken then said, Sunian, I will never give it to you, but I can promise you not to appear in front of Lanmin for a month. These words made Lu Jing's eyes suddenly light up. Are you telling the truth? Since I said it, I will do it. I will not take the initiative to appear in front of Lanmin this month. Lee Baiken originally wanted to stay away from Huo Linyuan and the others for the time being. What happened last time was too thrilling. He knew that if he took action again, he would have to make complete preparations to prevent anything from happening to Sunian and to hit Huo Linyuan with one hit. Lu Jing can just deliver it to your door. Why can't he make good use of it and let Lu Jing block Lan Yan for him and prevent that woman from showing up to disgust him? Or he can support him. Lu Jing was also very happy. After all, in 1 month, he could completely replace Lee Baiken's position in Lanzhou. But Lu Jing is still somewhat rational. He immediately came back to his senses when he heard the word but what? Tell me, what are you planning? But you must listen to me. This month you must deal with Huo Linyuan how I tell you to deal with him. Are you using me? Lu Jing was not a fool. Lee Baiken just looked at him. As if to say, yes, I am using you, whatever you want to do. Lee Baiken tapped the sofa with his finger bones. Wow, Lee Baiken looks so awesome. Is he trying to kill Huo Linyuan? Then I still have to work harder. If the male protagonist kills him, what will happen to Mo Bao? I have to work harder. Lee Baiken. These can all be thought of as calligraphy. Why is this woman thinking about that calligraphy treasure? There is no egg without a chicken. Doesn't she understand it's so simple? Okay, I'll do what you want, but you must not see Lanmin for 3 months. Make a deal. Lu Jing, there's something wrong with why this guy is so cheerful. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Which John Word. Chapter 200. Chapter 200. Mr. Liu, please stay. Lu Jing felt more and more that he was being plotted by Li Baikan. But he tried very hard to think about where he was being plotted, but he still couldn't figure it out. But the man's sixth sense told him that there must be. Master Liu, please stay. Lu Jing subconsciously raised his head when he heard the sound. When he saw the person standing in front of him, his eyes suddenly lit up. Because the person standing not far away was none other than Sun Yan. Sun Yan felt very uncomfortable being stared at by Lu Jing, because this guy almost wrote Sun Yan, I want to dig out your kidney on his face. There is no harm without contrast. In comparison, Sun Yan still thinks Li Baikan is better. Master Liu, don't look at me like that, don't forget, this is the Li family. Lu Jing laughed when he heard this, and laughed very wildly. Li family, do you think I take the Li family seriously? Do you believe it or not, even if I take you away directly, Li Baikan won't even dare to fart. These words reminded Sun Yan that Li Baikan didn't seem to have farted in front of her. Ahem, this is not important now. Lu Jing walked towards Sun Yan aggressively, looking like a wolf trying to catch the little white sheep. Master Liu, let me remind you that you have just reached an agreement with Baikan. You must know that a lot of things can happen in 3 months. Act quickly. Maybe you and Lan Min will have children. Are you sure you want to do it now? Break the agreement. These words immediately stopped Lu Jing. However, he still looked at Sun Yan with evil eyes. You eavesdropped on our conversation. I'm the hostess here. I'm at home. I don't think I'm eavesdropping. Sun Yan didn't waste any time and said straight to the point, actually, I just want to remind you that there are loopholes in Baikan's words. Lu Jing. He knew that this guy was definitely not simple. However, Lu Jing still maintained an indifferent look on the surface. Of course, it was his self-righteous indifference. Sun Yan, let me speak openly. Since Baikan wants to cooperate with you, then I also want to cooperate with you. When he heard this, Lu Jing laughed, haha, cooperation, what can we do to cooperate? Sun Yan, don't think that this young master doesn't know your true face. You are a vicious woman. I'm sorry for what you did regarding my son's matter, don't let me find the opportunity. If I find it? What about? Sun Yan interrupted him. These 3 words made Lu Jing speechless. Sun Yan groaned inwardly when he saw Lu Jing like this. The author of this brain-dead Mary Sue is always like this. He knows how to write settings without using any practical matters at all, and does not give her, a vicious female supporting character, a chance to abuse the heroine. Now that I think about it carefully, it's really a bit of a loss. I won't talk nonsense to you. Although Lan Min doesn't admit her feelings for my husband, I can feel that she has feelings. I want Baikan and you want Lan Min. In a sense, we two, the goals are the same. What you up to? Actually, there is a loophole in what Baikan said. Although he said that he would not come to Lan Min for 3 months, he did not say that Lan Min would not come to him for 3 months. If Lan Min came to see him, it would not be a violation of the contract. When Sun Yan said this, he looked at Lu Jing with a half-smile. She could tell immediately when she heard the plan. Sun Yan feels that she is a vicious supporting actress. If she doesn't do what a vicious supporting actress should do, then her title will be in vain. Lu Jing also clenched his fists. Damn it, why didn't he think of it? Thank you all for subscribing. I thought no one read it, but there are so many people subscribing, thank you all, I can happily write 8,000. End of this chapter.